Yes. So now this case is it's a situation of a moving of an oscillatory flow, a kind of moving wall flow, unidirectional again, but where the bottom wall is oscillating. So as by way of motivation, I'll show you a couple of things. Okay, so this is a kind of a schematic of a section of the wall inside our lungs, inside the capillaries within our lungs. Okay, so what happens is you have these air tubes. I mean, in your lungs, you have generations of air tubes through which air flows ultimately to your alveoli. So in about the 15th generation, you have small tubes which are lined. The walls of those tubes are lined by cilia. So if you just look at a small piece of the wall, it looks like this. So these cells here, which have these hair-like things, are on the. This is like the surface of the wall. Above that, this is the epithelial cells which are composed of the wall. So all this stuff is the wall. You can forget about it. This is part of the channel which has the air which you're breathing, and that channel is lined by these ciliated cells. So you have the cilia here. Above the cilia, you have a layer of mucus, and then further higher up, which is not shown, is where the air is flowing. Okay. The point now is that the mucus, which is actually going to trap pathogens and whatnot, has to be transported out of the channel, and it is transported by the cilia. But the cilia don't, I mean, they transport things by oscillating. So what you really have is you have a thin layer of viscous liquid, and the boundary that it sees has an oscillating kind of boundary, which is made up of all this carpet of cilia. So you have a situation of a layer of liquid sitting on top of an oscillating boundary in this case, where the layer of liquid is quite thin and it is highly viscous. So this is one sort of problem where you have a oscillating boundary. Another possible problem is something like this. So this is the microorganism, and its body is lined by cilia, and it is suspended inside a fluid. So if you play this, yeah. So this is, you can see the cilia sort of moving along its body, and the fact that it's exerting force on the fluid allows it to propel. And it can also move particles far away from it and stuff like this. So here all these guys have cilia and they are moving these other particles. Anyway, the point here is this is a situation where you have a boundary which has an oscillating boundary condition, and you're interested in what its outcome is far away from that boundary. And the fluid can also be, I mean, this is water, it's much less viscous compared to the mucus layer. Okay, so the point of that was to just motivate the problem that I'm going to take as a simple example now, which has other applications, of course, but this is just a couple of things which might motivate this. Okay, so now this problem was first looked at by Stokes. It's called the Stokes problem. And I'm sure he had other motivations for this. So what it is really is you have a fluid bounded between two plates. Okay. There is a top wall. This wall is completely stationary. Okay, and the bottom wall is oscillating with a velocity u naught cosine omega t. Okay, so omega is the frequency of oscillation of the bottom wall. The top wall is stationary. In between, there is a fluid. Now, suppose, I mean, so imagine that just for the sake of argument, if it wasn't oscillating, if the bottom wall was moving continuously, and you waited for long enough time, you will just get a Couette flow type profile. Right? So this is the case if omega is 0. If you have a vanishing frequency, that just means cos 0 is 1. You just have a wall moving with constant speed u naught. Then you'll just have a linear velocity flow. But if omega is non-zero, you can imagine that at the wall, the fluid will be moving with the wall. But then away from it, the effect might decay, and because it's oscillating, there will be a phase lag. So it's going forward, then it goes backwards. But as the effect of the stress propagates, you might have a phase shift of velocity. So the oscillations at the wall should get transmitted as oscillations of the fluid as you move away from the wall. This is the idea. So this might be something you might expect for omega not equal to 0. Okay, and then also you have a situation where if the wall is very, very far away, like in the case of in the situation where you had that cilia, there might not even be a wall, it could be unbounded. In that case, you would expect ultimately that, the fluid velocity might decay to 0. So ultimately it will become 0 here. It might get weaker and become 0. That's also possible if you have the wall very far away. So this is some kind of a far field situation. So these are all different possibilities coming out of this problem. And what we're going to do is use scaling to understand when we can obtain these different limits and how far is far and these kinds of things. Okay, so we are again going to consider now 1D unidirectional. It's still going to be fully developed in the sense that nothing will vary in the x direction. So let me put a coordinate system. This is x, this is y, this is the height of the channel, which is h. But unsteady. So unlike the previous problem we did, which was steady state, this is now an unsteady problem. Okay, so let's begin now by writing the governing equations. So we start with the continuity equation. Because, I mean, basically there's only one component of velocity. You just have dou u by dou x equal to 0, which just says the flow is fully developed. That's how I mean, it's not an imposition. The fact that it's unidirectional gives you fully developed. Then I come to the Navier-Stokes. So the left-hand side is just rho dou u by dou t. Then you might want to write u dou u by dou x, but dou u by dou x is 0, so you don't have that term, and there is no other component of velocity. Right? And this must be balanced by mu times rho square u by dou y square, the only viscous term, because you only have u varying in the y direction. And there is no gravity acting in this x direction. If you want, you could say that there is gravity acting here, rho g, I mean minus rho g. Yet because y is in the top direction. So in that case, the y momentum equation would just be which is just a hydrostatic pressure. And pressure doesn't come into this because we say there are no pressure gradients in the x direction. So you're not applying any pressure gradient across x. There is no, I mean, you're not applying a pump or anything. You're just moving the fluid by moving this wall at the bottom. So the pressure doesn't play a role here, we can just forget about it. In the y direction, it's just hydrostatically varying, and it doesn't affect the horizontal flow. So our only equation is this equation here, I can call this one. So let me go down. I just have this funny problem with one note. Okay. Yeah, it hangs once in a way. Anyway, okay. So, yeah, this is the equation. So now let us look at the boundary conditions. So I said u must be 0 at y is equal to h, right? U is equal to this u naught is some fixed parameter cos omega t at y equal to 0, and u is equal to 0 at, let's say, t equal to 0. So that's at the initial time. I'm saying that you're starting from stationary condition and then you start to move the plate. Okay? And the bottom plate is only moving, the top plate is always stationary, and this is your governing equation. Okay, so now let's begin scaling this problem. So remember that we're doing this problem in the context of those two examples I showed you. One where you have a viscous layer of a small height, so that the effect of oscillation will be felt throughout. And the other where you have a very thick liquid layer where you expect maybe the effects of oscillations only to remain close to the wall. Okay. And so the best way to bring this in is to start scaling the problem, and then we can talk about these different situations. Okay, so the first thing to do is, as we usually do, we'll choose scales y characteristic, u characteristic, and now time characteristic. So there are three unknown scales which we will determine. in our problem, and we substitute them by saying, for example, the actual t is the non-dimensional time times t characteristic, and similarly for the other variables. Right, so if we do this in our governing equation, we'll get rho u characteristic by time characteristic dou u dou t, where these are now non-dimensional u and non-dimensional time, right? And that must be balanced by mu as a viscosity. You will end up getting non-dimensional u here and non-dimensional y square, and you will get two length scales here, y characteristic, and the velocity scale u characteristic. Okay, so this is the first, this is one group of parameters, this is another group of parameters. And these two things are non-dimensional, right? So then we come down and then we look at the boundary conditions. So we say u tilde is equal to 0 at y is equal to now h by y characteristic, right? And we have u tilde is equal to u naught by u characteristic cosine omega t characteristic times the non-dimensional time, right? This is at y tilde equal to 0. So those are our two boundary conditions. If you want, you can also include the initial condition is just u tilde equal to 0 at t equal to 0. We'll come back to this initial condition later. Let's keep it aside for now. Okay, so you see this is where we are at this point of time, and we have not yet chosen any scales. Okay, so now we come in, this is the standard thing that we do. So now we can start choosing scales. First, we should try to enforce the requirement of order 1 scaling. Right? So remember, we want our variables to go from 0 to 1 over the range of interest. So now for the moment, let's say that we are interested in the flow across the entire channel. We want to know how the velocity is varying all the way from 0, y equal to 0 to y equal to h, in which case it's natural to set yc equal to capital H, so that the y coordinate goes from 0 all the way to 1. Similarly, in this case, the flow is not being driven by anything other than the wall motion. So if you want the velocity field to vary roughly from 0 to 1, it again makes sense to choose a u characteristic as u naught. Right? In that case, this term becomes 1, and so does this term become 1. So that's what we want. So then u tilde will also vary from, cosine omega t at the wall, where it's going from 0 to 1 there, and if it's where in the fluid also it's bounded by 1. So these two scales come out of the requirement of maintaining this so-called order 1 scaling, where characteristic scales represent the magnitude of the variables as far as we expect them. So if we do that, you see that now what are we left with? The boundary conditions become completely scaled nicely, but you have this term here where we have to still choose a time scale, and you have the governing momentum equation, where again there is an unknown time scale. We'll substitute this yc in a moment. What you will see here, however, is that the velocity scales cancel. So the velocity scale doesn't come in into the problem as far as determination of the time scale is concerned. Okay, so let's write this out in the way that we have so far. Okay, so before we do that now, in the momentum equation, again, we always have to decide which side to group the non-dimensional group. We can either divide throughout by rho Tc to put the non-dimensional group in front of the viscous term, or we can do the opposite. Okay, so now in this case, the question is what kind of problem we are considering. Let's consider first the case of that cilia and the mucus layer. In that case, the mucus layer is thin. We are interested in the flow throughout that mucus layer, and because it's thin and viscous, we expect the viscous terms to be important. We don't think in any case that we can neglect those terms. So what we will do is we will divide the equation throughout by mu times yc square, so that we get a non-dimensional group in front of the time dependence. So I get rho yc is h square now, so I'll put y h square here, divided by mu times Tc. Right, that du tilde by dt tilde must be equal to now dou u tilde by dou y tilde square. Rho square u tilde by dou y tilde square. Right, and this equation which is now non-dimensional, and this is now a dimensionless group. We know this is dimensionless now because this is dimensionless and the right-hand side is dimensionless, so clearly this should be dimensionless. And then you can also check the units if you want. This thing clearly has units of time and it's divided by time. And then the boundary conditions we have now are just u tilde is equal to cosine of, now here I still have an unknown time scale, omega tc, let me put that in brackets, times t tilde. And then u tilde is equal to 0. This is at y equal to 0. And this is at, this is at y equal to 0. And this is at y equal to 1. The top wall. Okay, so now we are beautifully set up to go to the heart of the problem. So what we are left with now is we have to somehow choose our characteristic time scale. Before I continue, does anyone have a question here? Okay, good. So we have just done what we have done, in the previous example also. Okay, so now we are left with, just by following this procedure, we have to choose a time scale. And this brings us to the crux of the physical question. So there are different options. Let me just write down the options here. So this comes back to the question on Moodle of how do we know where to choose a time scale? Should we set this group to 1 and determine the time scale from here? Or should we set the frequency group to 1 and determine the time scale from there? So let's say time scales. So if there are multiple groups which give you options of setting 1, it means you have multiple possible time scales, right? So let me look at the first time scale that comes if I set this term equal to 1. What I will get is I'll get a time that's given by rho h squared by mu, or which is basically h square over the kinematic viscosity. Remember, kinematic viscosity is meter square per second, and this is meter square, so clearly it has a units of second. So this is one time scale, h square over nu, and it's clearly a viscous time scale. So I'm going to call it TB. Okay. What is the physical meaning of this time scale? This time scale has been obtained how? By setting this term to 1. That means what we have done is we've balanced, or we have said that this is the time scale at which the viscous terms are going to be balanced by the the inertial rate of change terms. So what this means is that this is the time that it takes. So let's now use a diffusive analogy. You're balancing the diffusion of momentum with the rate of change of that momentum. So what it means is that this time scale is the time it takes for viscosity to diffuse from the wall into the fluid. That's why I've called it T viscous. And you can make, even from the actual quantities involved, it makes sense. So the height of the channel is h, and nu is kinematic viscosity. It tells me how quickly the momentum is being transferred. And so the time scale is coming from here. So a big wall, h is large, means it takes long time to reach the wall. A more viscous fluid means it takes less time because the momentum is diffusing faster. So it's a diffusive momentum transport time scale. Okay. The other possible time scale comes from this oscillation term by setting omega tc equal to 1. So that time scale could be approximately 1 over omega, but you can see clearly this is a time period. So instead of saying that, I'm going to say it's actually equal to 2 pi by omega, the time period. It's just the time period of the oscillation. And I'll call this T oscillation. So this time scale is a time scale coming from the imposed oscillations. Right, that should be clear. Okay, so now I just identified two possible timescales depending on what I choose to set equal to 1. Now, what do I actually choose as TC? That depends on the limit I want to look at now. So let's say I'm interested in, let's start with the first case where I had that mucus layer moving over the wall, right? So in that problem, remember that mucus layer was relatively thin and the wall and the cilia were oscillating. So in that situation, I expect that the influence of the wall should be felt throughout the mucus layer. In fact, I might also think that if the mucus layer is quite thin, it will move almost in phase with the wall. So wherever the wall is moving, the mucus will almost respond instantaneously. So such a limit corresponds to the case where this h term might be small, and the time scale should not be determined so much by the viscous time scale, but I want to look at the problem in the timescale of the oscillation of the cilia. So in other words, I'm saying that the influence of time is coming in only through the cilia, and I want to study the problem at that time period. I'm not interested in things much longer than that or much shorter than that. So the timescale I want to determine from the imposed cilia driving, and I want to see how far that cilia driving is going to affect the fluid. So I'm now going to make the physical choice. Make the physical choice that cilia driving is important. So I want to clearly resolve, or in my calculations or in my experiments or simulations, I want to clearly resolve the motion of the cilia, the forcing by the cilia, and I want to see how that velocity or momentum is being transported inside the fluid. So what this physical statement translates to me saying T characteristic is the T oscillation. That means I am setting this omega Tc equal to 1. And then this term will be a free dimensionless parameter in the momentum equation, right? So let me do that. What I'll get is I'll get rho times h square by mu. Now Tc is TOS, so it's 2 pi with omega in the numerator. Yeah, so that's a governing equation, and then the momentum equations here just become cosine 2 pi t tilde, so it's a periodic driving, right? And it's 0 at the walls. Zero at the top wall. This is at y equal to 0. Okay, so this is the form of the final scaled equation that we have. Okay, it's already 5 o'clock. I'll just take about 5 to 10 minutes more. Is that okay? If someone has to leave, you can leave and watch the recording, but I recommend, if possible, if you just stay for 10 minutes more. Okay, thanks. Then I'll proceed. Okay, so this is the idea now. This is the final scaled equation, and we have based it on the choice of, because we want to look at the cilia drive. Okay, so now we have this parameter. Let me again just call it pi because I don't know what else to call it. So the point is that if we now solve this equation exactly, it looks like a complex equation. If we solve it, we will get, for given various frequencies omega, right, with this cosine 2 pi omega t driving force, we will be able to solve this equation and find out the velocity field everywhere. But it's a partial differential equation in time and space. We might have to solve it numerically. However, now you can say what happens if pi is much, much less than 1, right? Because you have this free parameter. So if pi is much, much less than 1, this means basically a thin, right, highly viscous layer, right, with relatively slow oscillations. That means omega is kind of small. How small should the oscillation be? Well, that just comes from this condition that pi should be much, much less than 1. That means omega should be much, much less than 2 pi viscosity divided by density times height squared of the film, of that liquid layer that we're interested in. Right, so if we do that, what will we get? We'll get the simplified situation is equal to 0 now, because if pi is much less than 1, we can replace it by 0 under this condition that pi is much less than 1. So what can we control here? Of course, the easiest thing to control is the oscillation frequency of the plate, right? So if omega is sufficiently small so that pi is much less than 1, so relative to the viscosity, height, etc., then we can write an approximate solution as second derivative of velocity equal to 0, where the boundary conditions are now this cosine 2 pi t tilde and 0 at the other end. And you'll see that this has a trivial linear solution. So the solution to this problem is very simple. It's just 1 minus y tilde cosine 2 pi T tilde. Right, so you can see that at y equal to 1 it will be 0, and at y equal to 0 it's just cosine 2 pi t, and it's a linear variation in y because the second derivative is 0. Right? So this is the solution if pi is much less than 1. It's an approximate solution. So what does this mean? This corresponds to a quasi-static condition. Right? This means that in the bulk there are no quote-unquote unsteady effects are unimportant, and the only time variation is coming through the boundary. So in other words, it's actually what we had drawn here. For the case of omega equal to 0, remember I said that omega 0 means a coed flow with a constant velocity u naught. In that case, the velocity field is just a linear velocity field, 1 minus y. But now I can say, suppose omega is not really 0, but it's small. Right? So the plate is oscillating, but it is oscillating so slowly that for the fluid, it's as if at every instant it's following a different constant coed flow profile. Right? So that makes sense, right? If you do it extremely slowly, the fluid is able to relax fast enough that it almost has a linear velocity coed profile. But then the question is how slow is slow? That we have now answered. And then the physical question is, what does it mean to actually relax? Right, so we've answered the question of how small omega should be. That comes from pi much less than 1. But then what does it mean physically? Well, that depends on how we can write pi. Right? So pi, remember, is the ratio of these two things. But really, if I look at going back here to these time scales, it's actually a ratio of the viscous time scale to the oscillation time scale. Right? That is actually it's exactly what it is in the way we have defined these time scales. And that makes sense, right? Because I choose time characteristic as T oscillation. And remember, time characteristic was in the numerator, so this became T oscillation. And this other stuff which had units of time came from the balance of the viscous diffusion terms with the unsteady terms. So it is time viscous by time oscillation. And this much less than 1, it means that the momentum has enough time to diffuse. And that's how we attain the quasi-static condition. So that means I'm oscillating my plate so slowly, its time scale is large enough that the viscous effects are able to transport momentum from the plate to the other wall and maintain a quasi-steady condition. So for the fluid, it feels like at every instant of time, the plate is actually at a constant velocity. So this is what one might expect in that mucus problem if the mucus layer is sufficiently thin and the viscosity is sufficiently large, and if the cilia don't beat too fast. Then you can just simplify the problem and assume that it's at any given time you can solve it, assuming that it's just quasi-static and that you just have a steady velocity. Right, so that is one part of the problem. Any questions here? Okay, then let's just wind up by looking at the last thing, which is the analog of what we did in the previous electroosmotic flow. So that is the case of what would happen if, let's say, yes, I'm still interested in the cilia driving. So T oscillation is still, T characteristic is still going to be the oscillation time period. But now the height of the fluid can be large, like in the case of those microorganisms. Then I know that the viscous diffusion time is going to become very large, right? Because the height, remember, viscous diffusion time scale, TV, goes as h squared. So even if the fluid is viscous, if the wall is very far away, then basically I'm saying that, to reach infinitely far away, I will require infinite time, right, for the momentum to diffuse infinitely far away, regardless of the viscosity. So what to do in that case? Well, physically we know that if you have an unbounded condition, then the velocity should be equal to the velocity of the moving wall near the wall, but far from the wall it should decay. But how can I get that out of this problem? Well, what that means now is I should look for a region of influence near the boundary where the momentum will get affected by the wall, and much farther than that it shouldn't get affected. So this is similar to the boundary layer type scaling that we did in the electroosmotic problem. Remember, where we said that even if the electric field is small, very close to the wall it should be important because the pressure gradient produces a zero velocity there. Similarly here, no matter how unbounded my problem is, or no matter how fast the frequency is, maybe far from the wall I won't feel the effect, but near the wall I should certainly feel the oscillation effect. So what I want to know basically is if pi is much greater than 1, that is, remember what that means, the height is large. Let me not write it this way. H is large, right, or viscosity is small, or the frequency is large. Right, so either I take a unbounded problem, or I take a fluid with very low viscosity, so that the diffusion of momentum is very weak, or I take a very rapidly oscillating ball. In each of these cases, pi will be large, right? But now if I look at the scaling I had done here, and I take pi equal to large, I will get the absurd situation. I'll get the following, right? I'll get du tilde by dt is equal to 1 over pi times the viscous terms. And I'm saying pi is large, in this case this becomes 0. But this just tells me that u tilde is constant and basically unmoving. So what this is saying is that if pi is very large and the plate is oscillating so rapidly and the viscosity is weak, basically the fluid doesn't even feel the plate. Like the effect of the plate doesn't get transmitted into the fluid, and the fluid is everywhere static. It's unchanging in time. But we know this is not possible close to the wall. Close to the wall, certainly the fluid has to move along with the wall. So now we need to address that, we have to look for the boundary layer, just like we did in the previous problem. So let's call the boundary layer length delta. And to find this boundary layer, we'll do exactly what we did previously. So we come back to our scaling, right in the original scaling here. Yeah. So when we had scaled this problem, remember, we had y characteristic, which we had chosen to be capital H. That is because at that point we thought we will study the problem from 0 to h throughout the whole channel. Now we are saying, no, I have a very large frequency, a large value of pi. So I know that the relevant case is only close to the wall. So instead of scaling yc by h, I will scale yc by delta, where delta is this boundary layer. So the relevant thickness now is only the boundary layer, and y I'm interested in only from the bottom wall up to this boundary layer delta. So I shouldn't scale it with h, I should scale with delta. If I do that, that will bring delta square here and give me another essentially free parameter here to find out delta, because Tc will be still scaled by T oscillation. So if I translate that down, what will ultimately happen is we'll get omega rho, if I just look here, right, because I've already scaled with T oscillation. Instead of h square, now I'll have delta square, right, because yc was h and now yc is delta. Everything else is the same, mu times 2 pi. This omega and all has come because T characteristic is T oscillation. And the other side I have the viscous terms, the order 1 viscous terms. Right, and now I can only say u tilde is cosine 2 pi T tilde at y equal to 0. I cannot now look at y equal to capital H because that's very far away. So, but what I can say is that at y equal to, remember now, h over delta, which I expect to be much greater than 1. That means basically y tending to infinity, I can say u equal to 0. So this is like u equal to 0 as y tends to infinity almost, because h I'm saying is going to be very large. But this you can keep in the back of your mind. The main boundary condition is this one, that at y equal to 0, u will be cosine 2 omega T tilde. And then as y goes very large, it should decay to 0, the velocity. Okay, so now we have this unknown delta, but that's exactly what we wanted because we have this free parameter. And now I'm saying that I don't want the non-dimensional variable, this whole non-dimensional group, I don't want it to become 0. I don't want it to become very large, even though omega is very large. Right? So remember, omega is large, viscosity is small, and that was making this group, this whole group go very big, and that was giving me the condition that velocity is unchanging. But I want to retain this, so I want to say that delta is sufficiently small so that this becomes 1. So that means I should say delta square is equal to 2 pi mu by rho omega, or delta is equal to square root. So this is the region of influence, or the boundary layer. In this boundary layer is where you will feel the full effects of the velocity field in an unsteady manner. But if you go much further away from this boundary layer, closer to the top wall, you will basically not feel anything. That's what we had seen earlier. Interestingly, if I write this as delta over h, I have to divide the other side by h square. But you will see that this is nothing but square root of the oscillation time divided by the viscous time. So again, you see the ratio of time scales will come in to set the boundary layer thickness. And if this, so basically this is what the point is, if the diffusion time scale becomes sufficiently small, the boundary layer thickness will become sufficiently large, and ultimately it will become equal to the channel height. Then we'll go back to our situation of quasi-static situation. But if the oscillation time period is very small and the viscous time scale is big, then you won't have time to relax, and delta by h will become small. So that is the current situation that we're at, right? So that's how we derive the boundary. Okay, so finally, if I do this, then I get unity there, and I get rho u tilde by rho t is equal to tilde by rho y square. There are tildes everywhere because it's non-dimensional. And u tilde is equal to cosine 2 pi t tilde at y equal to 0. And u tilde should go to 0 as y tends to infinity. That's far away from this bottom wall where I've applied this boundary layer type analysis. Right? Okay. So now this problem seems to be as complicated initially as the full problem where we didn't do this boundary layer thing. But that's not true. That's because we have this case where we know y is decaying, u decays as y goes to infinity. So this is the problem Stokes actually considered, and it has a simple solution. So I will not derive it, I'll just leave it for you to see. But you can guess that you know that u must decay in magnitude as y increases. So you can guess that it goes as e to the power minus some alpha times y tilde. This is an exponential decay. And whereas in time you want it to oscillate, right? So you will have this cosine 2 pi t tilde. So that if y is 0, this term is 1, and close to the wall you are exactly cosine 2 pi omega t. As y increases, the velocity decays, and you also expect that there might be some phase lag. So you put a phase lag here, some g, which depends on y. Okay, so this is a guess. And if you substitute this into this equation, so let me call this 2 and 3. So if you substitute 3 into you will find that alpha, I just give you the answer here and you can do it later. And that g of y tilde is y tilde by square root of 2. So it's a simple solution. So I leave this to you as an exercise to show this later. So you just substitute this sort of guessed form into this equation. You do the derivatives and so on and match both sides, and you should be able to see that alpha is 1 by square root of 2 and g of y is y tilde by root 2 using the momentum governing equation and the boundary condition. And this y going to 0, u going to 0 as y going to infinity is automatically built in to the exponential term. Okay, so you get a solution sort of what you had initially expected, that if you have a problem where the wall is oscillating very quickly or the height of the channel is very large, it will decay, the velocity should decay away from the wall and it might oscillate on either direction. Okay, so let me now, what I've already done this as we wind up, just to show you what the solution looks like. So I've plotted that solution we just derived in Mathematica. Okay, so you can see what it looks like here. Okay, so this is the expression, exponential of minus alpha y, that's 1 over square root of 2, times cosine 2 pi t minus this g of y, which was y by square root of 2. And I'm now plotting it for different times. So the x direction is the axis, x-axis is the velocity magnitude, velocity, not magnitude, is the velocity. And y is y, the vertical direction is y. So you see that it starts moving with the plate, and then as you move away, it decays. So this is the way it behaves. I'll just play it and show it. Yeah, so this is the solution that we obtained for the situation, of the boundary layer. So the bottom plate is moving pretty rapidly, much faster than the viscous diffusion. So as a result, you're not able, the velocity is not reaching the top wall, but close to the bottom wall, you see that the fluid is moving with the bottom wall. As you move away from the wall, the magnitude of the velocity decays exponentially, and also the direction of the velocity can be out of phase, right? Because the viscous diffusion time that's transporting the momentum leads to a phase lag. So if the wall is moving in the positive direction now, the fluid above it senses that only after some finite time. By that time, the bottom wall has changed its motion. So you get this kind of phase lag and also a decay of velocity as you move away from the bottom. And we saw this we can derive, and we derived this analytically, without having to resort to any numerics, by using this idea of boundary layer that came directly from our scaling. So this was our final solution. So by way of recap, we obtained this solution from the simplified equation valid near the bottom wall. And remember, in the course of this derivation, even before we solve the problem, even before we actually obtained this analytical solution, let's say we couldn't obtain it, we would still have the result that we know the more or less the region of influence within a factor of 10, which is this delta, where the velocity will have a significant effect. And you can see that here. Remember, this y-axis is non-dimensional. This is y tilde. So 1 delta is actually 0 to 1. That's the first delta length scale. And you see that most of it is confined there. But within a factor of 5 delta, the velocity is becoming 0. So again, you see in this problem that within a factor of 10, our prediction is right. That if you go beyond like 5 to 10 boundary layer thicknesses, you will not see any motion. And that's what's happening here. You see the velocity is hardly oscillating. It's basically equal to 0, unmoving, which is what we had got, as a prediction right here when we said if pi is much greater than 1, so the height is large, then I'm saying the velocity is 0 everywhere, or it's a constant and it's 0. That's just because we were looking at the bulk. But if we said no, near the boundary, then we chose a new boundary layer thickness delta, rescale the problem, use the fact that we have to retain this term to get the unsteady effects. We got the boundary layer scale correctly to within a factor of 10 as we showed. And then in this particular case, we could solve the problem analytically. Otherwise, you can always solve it numerically. And then we got the behavior of the fluid near the bottom boundary. So something like this would be relevant to the case of those, the cilia within unbounded fluid. Okay, so that's it. I think we'll wind up. Thanks for staying on. But I think it was useful to finish this so that the next class we can move on to another problem. Okay, so I'm done for now. Again, this will be recorded. So since we have done sort of a lecture here, I'll post this up on the lectures on YouTube. So, you can always come back to this later on. And if you didn't follow it fully, you can look at it again. If you have questions, we can also discuss it in the next class. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, since you don't have to watch a lecture, I will put up another assignment with a few questions, which you have to submit only next Friday. So I'll give you a week. It won't be very difficult. It's based on things you've already done. So I'll put that up today evening. There is no quiz to answer because I've not released a lecture. But I'll release an assignment which you can work on. And its due date will be, I'll give you maybe the weekend. So I'll put it on the next Monday, not the coming Monday, the next Monday. Okay, so you have any questions right now?
So,
yes, Arjun.
So why did you take the time scale to be T oscillation in the boundary layer?
Right. So see, the idea was we still wanted to study the response of the fluid to the imposed oscillation, right? So that's why I allowed my time scale to be determined by the imposed oscillation that I was driving, because I wanted to study the response to that oscillation. If I had made the other choice, right? So you can try this out, all of you. if you go back to that problem, you say pi is very large, and now you say I'll choose the time scale, or you say omega is large, etc. And now you say I'm going to go back to the beginning and choose the time scale to be equal to the viscous time scale. What will happen if you do that? You will get the momentum equation will, I mean, you will not lose any terms there. You will have du dt is equal to the viscous terms. But in the Celia driving condition, right, you will get cos omega t, you will get cos omega divided by the time scale of the viscous time scale times t. So you will get this pi coming there. So pi won't come in the momentum equation, right? Because you chose characteristic time as, let's say, the time of viscous diffusion. But then you will get a ratio of time scales in your boundary condition. So it will be cosine omega divide omega times the time scale of your viscous diffusion. So that thing will become infinity. So you will get the kind of absurd thing where you will get an infinite frequency which doesn't make sense. So that's essentially telling you that you looked at the problem the wrong way by choosing your time scale to be the flow response time scale. Your fast frequency is showing up like an infinite frequency, so you cannot even solve that problem. So the only way to deal with that is to choose your time scale to be the forcing time scale, and then you can either see the case where the fluid is static or do the boundary layer analysis.
So in questions like these, should we, proceed with both and see which one actually gives us answers? Because
Yes, so
it seems like
yes,
it really isn't making a difference, right?
it seems like, sorry?
It seems like choosing a time scale based on the physics isn't really making a difference, right? Because if you go with one time scale, it ends up giving you a wrong answer, right?
Correct. So that means it makes a difference, right? If you choose a wrong time scale, it means that you have based your understanding, your understanding of the problem is wrong. So then when you go back and choose the other time scale, it shows you the correct way to think about it.
Okay.
Right, so see, what you would have said is if you had scaled the problem with the viscous response time scale, you're basically saying that my problem has enough time to respond to the system, and what's important is the viscous diffusion is dominant. That's what you're saying in that problem. That viscous diffusion is fast enough that it's able to transport the velocity throughout my domain. So I'll scale time with viscous diffusion time. This is your physical understanding of the problem. But now when you go in and actually put the parameters, let's say for the Celia problem, you will find that your frequency is tending to infinity. So that the actual problem you want to study of, let's say, a low viscosity, large channel case has an extremely rapid frequency at the boundary condition. So when you start getting these types of infinities, it means something is wrong. That's why we are doing order 1 scaling, so that you get everything less than 1. So you can take limits of things going to 0, that will allow you to make progress. But when things are going to infinity, it means you have approached the problem at the beginning in the wrong way. So once you see that infinity in the boundary condition, right, then you have to recognize that, okay, my original physical statement that viscous diffusion is always fast enough to transport momentum is wrong. That means my time scale should not be viscous diffusion time scale. Instead, let me set the time scale as at my driving frequency, and I will then evaluate in the problem whether the viscosity is, whether viscous effects are fast enough or not. So if you do it that way, you will then get a new non-dimensional parameter, which if the frequency becomes large will go to 0, and then you can do this boundary layer type analysis.
Okay. Yeah, good. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
For some complex equations, let's say the scaling factors, possible scaling factors that we could choose for a specific variable are such that we are not able to account for them. Like there are, let's say, n such possible factors that we could use in scaling, and we cannot keep track of those factors. So how to choose and keep track of, like how to choose the correct scaling factor and how to keep track of those factors. Like if there are, let's say, 5 possible ways in which I could choose TC, for example.
Yes.
But I could only see in the equation only 3 of them, and even among them I have to choose one correct one.
Okay, so see, that's the point of this analysis, that no matter how complex your problem is, if you write down all the equations correctly at the beginning, then you apply scaling, it will reveal to you how many options are there. You can never make a mistake there, right? So like you saw in this problem, you just replace everything by T characteristic, Y characteristic, length characteristic. If you have temperature characteristic, you do all of that. And then you plug them in. And then in every equation, you can make one term equal to 1 by multiplying throughout by the group that multiplies that term, right? And then you will, so at least one term will have a coefficient of 1. That's what we saw here. In this case, we chose that to be the viscous term. So all the other terms will get multiplied by some groups in the boundary conditions in the domain equations. And after you choose all your, some of the options will be obvious, right? So that you will choose. Then you will get some pre-parameters, which will allow you to set time scales, length scales, temperature scales, and other things. And now you might have choices, like you said. But even if you have choices, the first thing is those choices will be clear. You cannot not see that choice, because if you don't see it at some point of the problem, you will realize that, hey, look, I have an extra parameter group here, and I still have to make a decision about it. So like in our problem, even if you didn't realize about that frequency time period thing, it's there in the boundary condition, so you cannot miss it. Right? So at some stage, you will be able to realize that I have all these different possibilities. Now from every possibility, you get a different possible time scale. So like in our case, we got a viscous time, we got the oscillation time period. Let's say you had some other physics in the problem, you would have other possible time scales set by other physical processes. Even if that is the case, the first benefit of scaling is it becomes very clear that these are all the possible competing time scales. Similarly for length scales or other, other scales in the system. So the first benefit of scaling, why you should always do it, is that it reveals to you what all these scales are. You don't have to guess. Right? So in a new problem, it may be complicated. Maybe it will be obvious that, okay, I have viscous diffusion time scale, I have convection time scale, you have some reaction rate time scale, but you might forget maybe mass transfer time scale. But when you scale the equations and you come to the concentration equation, you will see that there is a group involving time, which will make it obvious to you. So if you leave the time characteristic free, wherever it comes in a group, that will give you a new possible time scale. So in this way, you can catalog all of them, okay? And now you have to choose one of them to set the actual characteristic time, and all the other groups will give you different dimensionless groups. So at this stage, you have to, then you have to think about the problem. So that's why, it still requires some work. It's not a straightforward thing. But depending on what you're interested in, you make some choice. And then all the other things will give you non-dimensional parameters. And then for a given problem, you can evaluate those values. So if all of them are bounded between 0 to 1, nothing is very large, then you can feel that you made a reasonably good guess. And if you start varying parameters and one of them starts going to infinity, that means then you know that you have made some mistake. You should have chosen a different scale. And then you can go back and revise your understanding. But it is an iterative procedure, and the more problems you solve, the more you get kind of experience.
Okay. So I understood. So let's say for a system of equations, we have multiple scales. So the best way to approach is first make a smart guess of the scale that you want to take, then do the process iteratively.
Yeah, it boils down to that, but in reality, you don't have to do it, because as you solve, so in this course, when we solve many different problems, you will already get some, with every problem you solve, you will get some more experience. So then you will reach a point where for almost any problem, you will already know what would be the best choice.
Right, that is what I meant by smart guess.
Yeah. So if you're ever confused with a new problem, then there's nothing to do. You just have to try one and try to go as far as you can and see if things are making sense. But the point is, even if you make a mistake, you will learn something. So this is why if you all read any research papers, you will see, in good papers, you will see that this is the first step. Everyone will scale things, or they'll at least tell you what are the time scales in the system. So when you read a paper and people are talking about, okay, this is the time scale of this process, time scale of that process, and it's a competition and all, what they mean is it's all coming from this, even though they may not say it. So you have to start with the governing equations, and then all these scales will come out, and you can understand the process very nicely this way. So for example, what I have shown in this case is you can understand the physics of the problem in terms of these time scales, whether the oscillation time scale and its competition with the diffusion time scale of momentum tells you everything about the problem, whether it's fast or slow, and what should you expect the velocity to be, and things like this. Okay, so I mean, right now we've solved only 2 problems. So try to understand this as much as you can in this context, and then as we do more problems, it will become clearer. Because with every problem we do now, like later on we are going to do other things, perturbation calculation, solving nonlinear equations. But all of those problems, the first step is still scaling. So that's why I'm spending time on this. And so with every problem we do, we will scale those problems. So after some time, it will become automatic for you. But it's a very useful thing to have. So no matter how simple the problem is, if you scale it, and then identify the scales properly, it will, in that process only, you will learn a lot about the problem. Okay, so if nothing else, I think we'll close down. I think all of you all will also be tired of concentrating, and I'm also tired. So then we'll pick up on, yeah, so what we'll do now is, like I said, I'll give you some practice questions along similar lines so that you can, I mean, all these doubts you have, the best thing to do is to try out some questions, right? I'll give you some questions, you can try those out. I'll try to upload that assignment today or latest tomorrow. If you try them out, then we can discuss it on Tuesday or even on Friday. And the submission deadline will be on Monday, the next Monday. And now on Tuesday, I will upload another lecture. So we will follow that same process. So we will still meet for a short live interaction on Tuesday. I'll address questions about this lecture for people who haven't seen this and about the assignment if you have any. If not, we'll wind that up quickly and I'll leave you to watch a new lecture which I will upload on Tuesday. That will be a pre-recorded thing. Okay, so that's all that I had to say. If you have any other questions, if not, we'll wind up. Okay, thanks everyone. I'll stop recording, and remember you can find this recording on Google Drive later also. Thanks, you can leave.